If we can, good afternoon, everybody. A very warm welcome to our April Integrated Care Board, a meeting that's held in public but is not a public meeting. Just to make everybody aware, we are planning to record the meeting for administrative purposes so that a record can be drawn from that recording as well as the notes. I'm assuming everybody is in agreement with that. If there's any concerns, if you would let us know. It would be good if all cameras could be off during the meeting, with the exception of the presenter and the papers that will be shared. And if you could make sure your microphones are on mute during the course of the meeting, it just helps with some of the sound quality. And for board members, if you indicate that you wish to ask a question by raising your hand in the normal way, that would be great. There'll be an opportunity for any questions, and I'll come to my colleague Tracy Shewan in a moment to see if we've had any questions submitted in advance of today's meeting. Failing that, anybody joining us today will have an opportunity of asking a question on anything on the agenda of the board at the end. And what I propose is that we'll do that, allowing people to actually ask that question in person rather than just read them out. So we have apologies, Jill, from John Henderson. And I think that is the only apology that we've recorded for today's meeting. Is that correct?
We actually have an apology from Buki Adeyemo, but we have Eric Gardner coming in her place.
Welcome, Eric, and we'll note Buki's apologies. Just as we're on this point in the meeting, I want to do this, if I can, at the start of the meeting before we get into the other business. Today is Sally Young's last board meeting, our Director of Corporate Governance. Sally is given 19 years, Sally, I think, of loyal and dedicated service to the Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent system in many guises over the years and in many organisations. And it's been great to have Sally's steady hand and values in place as we've formed as an ICB from July last year. So Sally, there will be an opportunity, I know, when colleagues are going to join us to do this more formally, but I just want to put on record the board's thanks to you for everything that you've done throughout your career, but most notably in the frenetic period from July last year to help to get us established. So Sally, on behalf of the board, thank you very, very much for everything that you've done to support us all.
Thank you.
If I can move us to the Leadership Compact, we present this at every meeting that we hold, both at board level and at sub-board level. And it's an important guide in terms of how we conduct our business and how we behave with each other. And I commend it to you, and we'll review at the end of the meeting our adherence to that. I believe we are quorum, and we've no problems with making the decisions that we need to make this afternoon. And just want to pause, if anybody has got any conflict of interest on any item on the agenda today that's not recorded in the attached register of interests that each board member has completed. So nobody has indicated that, so we'll move into item 2 if we can, the minutes of the previous meeting that were held on the 16th of March. If we could take those for accuracy first, please, on page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, and page 11. Can I just check, is everybody happy with the accuracy of those minutes? Okay, thank you, and thank you, Jill, for the production of those. If we could then just move into item 3, the action log. One item there concerning the healthy ageing and frailty strategy, and the update is that a meeting took place on the 28th of February, and the results of that will be published in due course. So I'm assuming that that is complete. Okay, thank you. So, Tracy, I'll just pause there and ask, have we any questions that have been submitted to the board in advance of the meeting that we need to address at this point?
No, Chair, we've had nothing submitted in advance, and I'd just ask that we don't use the chat function as we go through the meeting, and actually if any of the public have questions, that they wait to the end and we'll be allowed to raise their hand and ask the questions there and then. Probably make it all a lot easier.
That's great, thank you, Tracy. So if colleagues would refrain from using the chat function as we go through, and as I indicated at the start of the meeting, we'll pick those questions up in person as we conclude. Okay, so we will move into item 5, the ICB Chair and Chief Exec update. And before I invite Peter just to pick up on a few issues, I'll just raise a few of my own. And the first one is to recognise the publication of the Hewitt Review, the report, and acknowledge receipt of that. There'll be further work ongoing around this, and we await the government's response to that review. And we, as I said a moment or two ago, we've got processes in place to consider the findings of that report. And indeed, Peter, we're hoping to bring a paper to the next meeting of the ICB to look at that in more detail. Secondly, I'd just like, as I do every month, to thank all frontline staff right across the system, regardless of where they're working, for their hard work over the last month. It's been another challenging period, and we're very grateful to all of our system partners and our workforce for everything that they've done during the course of that period. In terms of the report, I think it's important under 1.1 to note the joint forward plan will be published on the 30th of June. And that's been going through quite a wide socialisation process, with further engagement planned, including an ed workshop and also passage through the health and wellbeing boards prior to coming back to the board in June for sign-off. And under 1.3, you'll note that the ICP strategy was published on the 31st of March. And that document, which again I'll commend to everybody on the meeting today, will guide us over the next 5 years. A lot of work, a lot of partnership and engagement gone into the production of these documents. And again, I'm very grateful to the maturity of all of system partners and participants in that process. It's always great to be able to celebrate success, and under 1.2 of the report, you'll note that Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent system partners have been identified and shortlisted as part of Health Service Journal and other awards. Look forward to hopefully some successful outcomes as a consequence of those nominations in due course. And finally, I just wanted to touch on the finance for 22-23, although it's subject to audit and official confirmation. I'm just grateful to the system finance directors led by Paul Brown in terms of the way that the process has been handled for 22-23. We know that we've got significant challenges ahead as a system, but it's great to know that that group has been meeting on a regular basis with the executive teams across the patch to be able to assess the risks to delivery going forward into this financial year. And with that, Peter, if I can, I'll pause and just hand over to you for any exceptions you want to pick out from the report.
Yeah, thank you, David. So just a couple of things from me. So just to reiterate the thanks for all of the hard work put into land the ICP strategy that was done so on the 31st of March. So that's on our website, as David mentioned, but the effort and energy put in to develop it at system level with all system partners I felt was immense. So a huge thank you to all that enabled that to be achieved by the required date. Just linking to that then, and other items that are relevant in terms of our development going forward, you'll see in the report the population health management programme has taken another step forward, and we've secured a relationship with a partner to be able to work with us over the next period of time, building our expertise, our knowledge around that ability to be able to understand local need and address local need. So that neighbourhood agenda, as it were, in terms of ability to be able to support local populations is obviously critical to all ICBs, and I'm sure that with the PHM work that we've now put in place, we'll be able to do that in a rapid way. Linked again to that improvement agenda, you'll see that there's reference to continual quality improvement within the report, and again that's another vital tool to enable us to improve on a daily basis. So, you know, improvement and quality improvement isn't just about the really grandiose huge pieces, it's as much about that day in day out small thing to improve, you know, just a little bit in the life of a clinician or the life of a service user. So all of those things for me are part of our broader patchwork sort of quilt of improvement across this year and future years. And so in terms of this year, you'll see that we've got the operating plan on the agenda, so I won't steal the thunder of others that are going to describe that in glorious detail. But what I would say is that the operating plan as it stands at the moment, and there is still further work to be done with the regional and national team to land it for this year, but as it stands at the moment, what I would describe it as challenging but deliverable. So we have significant challenges, whether that be financial, operational, clinical, etc., within the plan, but they're not unachievable. So of course the trick with things like CQI and PHM and all the other initiatives that we've got to support delivery is to make sure that we're on the top of our game and we are able to deliver that challenging but deliverable set of plans. And the final point I would mention, you trailed it at the beginning, David, is the Hewitt report. I personally think that the report is a really important document in the life of the NHS and ICBs in particular, whether it be around the remit, the fundamental role of ICBs right here and now and going forward, or other aspects such as the financial regime, importance of data, etc. I think it touches on vital points, issues, and perhaps inadequacies at the moment that we need to work on within the NHS and with system broader partners. And I think we can do that through, as well as board conversations in public, I think we can also do that in some of our development sessions. So I'd like to suggest that we have a conversation in quite detail level about the Hewitt report and next steps in our development session, for example, in May, our board development session in May. Okay, I'll stop there, Chair. Happy to take any questions, comments.
Thank you, Peter. Just pause there. Any board members got any questions or points of clarification on the report? Julie?
Thanks both. I really valued the report because I thought it highlighted some of the key issues that we go on to discuss in more detail later on in the meeting. I think the one thing for me is the importance of now having the ICP strategy as being the overarching strategy. There are quite a few mentions throughout the meeting, and we've got a really good example of an excellent strategy that we're going to talk about next using Living My Best Life. It's how they actually all sit to contribute towards that ICP strategy. It could be quite confusing to anybody looking on, and I wonder if there was a way of actually demonstrating how each of these actually contribute towards that ICP strategy.
Thanks, Julie. Great question. Peter?
Yeah, so there are, so if you like, very basic ways that you can do these kind of things. So, for example, the front cover sheets for all board papers have a section that links to the strategy of the organisation. In this instance, it'd be the ICP strategy, and within that define the ambitions that are in the strategy, the objectives. They're called different things in different strategies, aren't they? But the key expectation statements in the strategy, and which directly link to the paper in question. So whether it be through that route or a more, if you like, sort of convoluted, grandiose route, I'm sure that we can find a way to be able to create the linkage between the ICP strategy ambitions and each individual item that we debate and discuss at board or board committee. Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Julie. Chris? You're on mute, Chris.
So I realised that halfway through, sorry. I just wonder if the joint forward plan might give us some space to explore that, actually, Julie, because the joint forward plan is, of course, our 5-year plan. In other words, strategies by their nature tend to be multi-year. So actually, given that the JFP is also the kind of the executable plan of delivery linked to the ICP strategy, we might have a schematic that we can kind of set out within the parameters of the JFP that helps kind of set that context. I'm more than happy to take that away.
Thanks, that would be helpful. I think one sort of high level and then the more detailed delivery. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Megan?
Thank you. I just wanted to welcome the improvements in cancer performance which are set out in the report at UHNM, and alongside that acknowledge the significant challenges around elective care that are detailed here. The figures here are just around UHNM. I just want to say that obviously we do monitor ICB residents as a whole across the different providers as well at the Finance and Performance Committee, and I think later on in the papers it does pick up ICB residents as opposed to just UHNM figures as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Megan. Okay, thank you very much for your comments. We note the Chair and Chief Exec update and move into item 6, and Julie's already alluded to this. We are going to go through the Living My Best Life with Autism, Stoke-on-Trent Strategy for Autistic Children, Young People and Adults, 23 to 26. A really impressive document, and look forward to hearing a bit more about this, Chris, and then entering into a discussion about any aspects board members need to pick up.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm conscious John Rouse, I think, has joined us in the past few minutes as well, and John may want to comment as well. So perhaps if I start and then hand over to John, and then we can open the conversation up. So as has been trailed, this has been developed in partnership between the City Council and ICBs as the responsible organisations, but it has been supported through the Learning Disability and Autism Partnership Board. It's been through the Health and Care Senate. It's been through System Performance Group and Finance and Performance Committee, and subject to approval today will also then go onward into City Council governance processes for final sign-off. I'll take the document as read, but I think there's a couple of things that are worth just pulling out as salient points. First is that, as you can see within the strategy, we estimate that about 1% of the population of Stoke-on-Trent will have some form of autism. That's about 2,500 people, and we expect that rate of prevalence to increase to about 2,700 over the next 10 years. But actually, when you look at the rates of prevalence through particular lenses, and in particular the children in care, that rate of prevalence increases to almost a fifth, just under 20%. So I think it's right that we bring this particular focus onto autism. There is a high level of overlap between people who have autism and people with a learning disability and mental health, but it's important to recognise that autism is different to both of those. It's a neurodevelopment condition that affects how certain people process certain types of information, and again, linked to the prevalence does warrant a specific focus and approach. I think We've detailed in the covering report and in the strategy itself the extensive engagement that we've been through on how we can tailor the 6 national themes to local commitments, and indeed as a result of that there is in fact a 7th theme which recognises the role of parents and carers. I'm not going to go through all the detail in the report, but just reflecting on questions that have been asked of previous strategies in terms of oversight. There will be a delivery plan that has got the actions and the metrics. We will be establishing a Stoke Autism Partnership Forum, and there'll be a link back again to Learning Disability and Autism Partnership Board. There is a plan to launch the strategy in May 2023, post the election that's coming up in the next few weeks. But there were just a few kind of salient covering remarks I thought useful. I did say I'd hand over to John at that point. So John, I don't know if there's anything you want to say by way of covering remarks as well.
Yeah, I won't say very much more, Chris. Just 2 or 3 things I want to draw out. The first is the fact that this is an all-age strategy, because previous strategies have been adult strategies, and I think it's fantastic that we've now got an autism strategy which is about life course. It is all age, not least because it will really facilitate good transitions between childhood and adulthood, and make sure that the needs of people with autism do not fall through a gap or face a cliff edge at that critical point of transition. I think the strategy lays bare some of the challenges that we face, and the importance of timely diagnosis and the pressures within the system to meet that. But the most important challenge that we have to rise to collectively is ensuring that as many people with autism as possible can live successfully within the community, fulfilling their own ambitions for their own lives in terms of independence, access to work and other opportunities, and that their innate strengths and abilities are fully harnessed in terms of their contribution to society. So this is therefore a strategy that cuts across all public sector bodies' work really, and therefore is great that not only is this going through our own cabinet this cycle, but is going through your governance, through our governance in terms of the ICS, and can be adopted by other partners as well. And finally, this is very personal for me because I have an autistic daughter, adopted daughter, and therefore know very well some of the barriers and challenges that are faced as younger people with autism go through adolescence. And I just hope that through this strategy, not just through adolescence, but the whole life course, we can do something different in Stoke-on-Trent that removes those barriers and make sure that all people with autism can fulfil their potential. Thank you.
John, thank you very much, and Chris, thank you. Interesting reading the papers prior to this meeting. This document I thought was incredibly well put together and actually told the story from almost through the lens of a service user rather than being the usual fare of strategies. So I congratulate you on pulling that off. The team that have put this together have really given it that focus. I guess the immediate question would be, I'm assuming that there will be a parallel position for Staffordshire in due course, that there will be a similar strategy developed to support this group of people as well, Chris.
Yes, there already is, Chair. It was developed pre-ICB days, so we now have a Staffordshire strategy. Subject to next few weeks, there'll be a Stoke-on-Trent strategy, both of which take their time period to 2026, which aligns to the national strategy around autism as well.
That's great. Okay, thank you very much for that, Chris. So take some questions. I've got Julie first.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to pick up John's last point. I think what makes this, it's a really good document. It's really easy to read. It's very clear, But I think really picking up your last point, and there's the 7th additional local theme, is that parents and carers will be able to see that there's a clear path, and that transition time, which has been so difficult. So I think it's excellent, and would acknowledge all the hard work and look forward to seeing the delivery.
Thanks, Julie. Heather?
Yeah, thank you. Really welcome this, and I've seen it in its various guises through the committees that were referred to before. I suppose for me, despite the fact that I've read it a couple of times, what's not really clear for me, and apologies if this is an oversight in my, I suppose, reading of the document, is what this is great now. This is now going forward. We're going to have these strategies because, of course, we're talking about both, aren't we? But what about people who've potentially been missed on their journey to adulthood already? So is any provision being made to try and, I don't want to use the words mop up, but actually we should be working to actively seek out people who may have not been able to receive the benefit of this emerging strategy, and who therefore exist in the system are possibly experiencing some of the difficulties we've highlighted within the strategy itself.
That's a good question. John?
It's a brilliant question, and if it isn't reflected well enough in the strategy, we must make sure it goes into the delivery plan, because you're absolutely right. And if adults who've not been received diagnosis and have been struggling, through their lives, and actually are autistic, then they absolutely have a right to that identification, that diagnosis, and to be facilitated to make that full contribution. And there are a number of ways that can happen, but there is certainly a role in terms of general practice potentially. There's certainly a role in terms of employers. One of the things that we're doing as a city council at the moment is putting a lot of effort into neurodiversity and making sure that we are genuinely a workplace that supports and champions neurodiversity in terms of our workforce. And if we were to identify someone who we felt might be autistic, then in a very sensitive way, that might be a conversation we had to try and facilitate the process of diagnosis. And I think employers can help play a role, both in terms of making sure their recruitment and retention processes are wide open to people with different neurological makeups, and also in terms of helping those individuals to get diagnosis and to make the most of their lives as well.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, Heather. Thanks, John. Any further questions on the strategy? No, thank you. So the recommendation is for approval by the ICB strategy, and it will be published and implemented in due course. So everybody happy to do that. And John, just our thanks back to the team at Stoke for pulling together such a superb piece of work.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 7 is the general practice 5-year forward strategy. And Chris, I think we're handing over to you again for enclosure 7.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So I'm going to start with a couple of thank yous, if I may. Again, I'm not intending to go through the document. I'll take it largely as read, but just some covering remarks. But a couple of thank yous. So Sarah Jeffrey, who I think has joined the call since Sarah's our portfolio director for primary care and has done a lot of the heavy lifting around developing the document that you see today. Paddy Hannigan, who's acted as our clinical and professional lead, but also actually to a couple of non-executive colleagues, so Megan and Julie in particular, who we've taken this through FPC twice, I think, and we got some really positive input from Megan and Julie in between times. So the backdrop to the strategy is the Fuller Stocktake. Colleagues may remember that was published last year. It was a national review by Dr. Claire Fuller on what was working well in primary care and general practice in particular, and the areas for improvement. And indeed, we brought through a presentation to, I think it was the first ICP partnership board around the Fuller Stocktake, and we've been working to develop our response to that ever since, as other ICBs. And it's perhaps worth saying that there is quite a lot to reflect on positively within general practice. It has risen to the challenge of COVID and the legacy impact, as well as responding to sustained levels of demand. And we can see that through the appointment data. We've never delivered more appointments in general practice than we have this year. 69% of those are face-to-face, 46% of those are same day, 87% of those are within 14 days. All of those three figures are above national and regional averages. CQC ratings are generally high, 94% are good or outstanding, and patient experience of GP services is consistent with national averages, if not slightly above. But we can't ignore the fact there are some challenges, and we've had a number of programmes in place to address variation and issues that we've experienced, particularly in terms of workload and workforce. And more recently, of course, colleagues will be aware of a national focus on access through GP contracts and the National Recovery Plan that's due to be published in detail soon. So we've taken all of that and used it to set an ambition centred around an explicit statement to improve patient access, quality, experience of a consistently high standard. So you can see within the strategy we've wrapped the 4 building blocks of Fuller, so integration, same-day urgent access, continuity, prevention around our existing 8 enabling programmes. There will absolutely be an emphasis on access, and we will need to report on that as we go through, but I think it's really important that we share back to the board that we will need to focus on each element of the 4 building blocks to make sure that we make the progress that we need to make. In terms of engagement, we've worked with local medical committee, with PCN clinical directors, the primary care collaborative, with grassroots general practice, as well as Health and Care Senate, System Performance Group and Finance and Performance Committee, as I say. So I think it's a really ambitious document. It sets out a really clear direction of travel to tackle some of the issues that we know we've got in general practice. And yeah, happy to take questions and comments, Chair.
Thanks very much, Chris. Very timely and helpful strategy to be before the board today. Just pause and take any comments. And Jack and Paddy, I don't know whether there are any additional comments you'd like to make at this point. Paddy.
I think the strategy is actually a sort of continuation of work that's been happening over a number of years, refocused around Fuller. I think we've worked quite extensively with general practice about a number of elements of the strategy. Times are extremely challenging for general practice, but I hope the strategy will take things forward, both for patients and for GPs and their practices and for the ICS. So I think it's, as Chris said, it's an ambitious document, and I think hopefully we can all get behind it.
Thanks very much, Paddy. Jack?
Thanks. I very much welcome the strategy document and very much echo all the thematic elements within it. What I would say is sort of cautiously, I would like to I guess sort of encourage the system to work collaboratively. There's a lot of fear, I think, within general practice in terms of a top-down imposition, and I think there is probably I think the Fuller report does have some latitude around local negotiation and collaborative working, which I think a lot of certainly locally GPs really need that reassurance and affirmation really for us to kind of move at pace forward. That's what I'd say. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jack. Josie?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was struggling to get myself off mute then. And as Chris said earlier, we've seen this a couple of times at F&P, and yeah, I fully support the document. I guess my comments links on what Jack has just said, in that I understand there's been a lot of engagement to get to this point, and it's building on, as Paddy said, what's gone before. But, you know, primary care is in a really difficult place at the moment, and I think we've got to work equally as hard now to keep the 143 practices and the 25 PCNs and others with us as we go through the implementation of what's outlined in the strategy. So it would be interesting it would be good, I think, for a board to understand at key points in time how that's going, and to obviously make sure that we keep that engagement that I know has been there to date.
Thanks very much, Josie. I'll just bring Simon Fogel from Health Watch, and then bring you back in a sec, Jack.
Oh, thank you very much. I guess the only comment I'd have to ask the board to consider is, I noticed there is some mention within it in terms of access, and that we do consider access in its broadest terms in terms of the equality and impact that might have on disparate groups of people. That if more things go digital and you have to go through a digital platform or different phone systems or this, that and the other, that the strategy does make sure it includes the full range of access requirements of people, so that no one is unintentionally, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, it's been a long day already. Is unintentionally, that it's harder for them to make contact. Yeah. Thank you, yeah, David. Yeah, so just put that
thanks, Simon. Very important point, Jack.
Thanks. Some of you will know that as very much at an individual sort of practice level in PCN, we've very much sort of spearheaded around that digital agenda, and I'd like to sort of reassure Simon that digital poverty and digital exclusion is very much at the forefront of our thinking. What I wanted to really highlight was, is that the immense work and included within it around workforce, but also within the People's Directorate around an awful lot of work that's been collaboratively done at a system level around workforce development and apprenticeship, because I think apart from general practice being having the primacy of patient care, it really is the engine room of care delivery in terms of where I guess the work gets done. That's not to denigrate any work in secondary care or our specialist colleagues, but it's just the facts that where the volume of work is done is in primary care and general practice. And what I wanted to say was really the immense work that's being currently done within the People's Directorate and the apprenticeship and workforce development. But further, I think we should expand into collaborative working, not just with local authorities, but also our two large higher education establishments in terms of working that local, developing that local workforce, and also then engaging with our schools and other educational establishments in order to really make that sustainable and resilient for the medium and longer term. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Great point. Chris?
Yeah, just briefly on Simon's point, Chair, if I may, I mean, it's absolutely an issue that we're alive to. So technological development does have its place within the delivery of general practice services, whether that's cloud-based telephony or other kind of ways of forms of engagement and monitoring. But I think I did say in the introduction that we're about 69% of all appointments in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent are face-to-face. That's above the regional and national average. In fact, actually in the Midlands, it's the second highest. There's only Derby and Derbyshire, I think, at 71% that are marginally ahead of where we are. So I think it is a risk that we're vigilant to and alive to.
Thanks very much, Chris. John?
Very much welcome the strategy. Really like the 4 building blocks that are in there. If there was a sort of a feeling of a bit of a gap, it's around continuous improvement. And there's a lot about in the strategy about OD, but I think continuous improvement of practice is a somewhat different thing. So there's not much reference in there to, for example, benchmarking, use of data, exchange of best practice, stronger PCNs supporting weaker PCNs in particular areas. So I mean, obviously, I'm not asking for the strategy to be changed, but I do hope in its execution that there will be a strong focus on driving continuous improvement based on peer support and good use of performance data.
Thanks, John. Very helpful. Alex?
Thank you, Chair, and afternoon, everybody. And I just wanted to build on Jack's point, really, that he raised about the workforce development piece, which, of course, is key to our future pipeline. So very much in our thinking is that work with our education institutions, but I think the other piece of work that we are doing is working with the new deans within the region, and we only met yesterday actually to think about how do we really think differently in terms of the workforce development piece, particularly around primary care. So very much part of our strategy and thinking about that journey into work and different careers, but also how our workforce is going to look different into the future. So just for assurance, really, Chair, in terms of Jack's point that we are in that space and hope to build on that going forward. Thanks, Alex. Chris?
Yeah, again, very briefly to John's point, because I think it's really important that we know that, as I say, we've got some really positive attributes of delivery of service, but we also know we've got some variation, and that some of that variation is quite wide, actually. So there absolutely is a role for us to coordinate and publish data back to practices and PCNs to drive that improvement. And in fact, just recently, we've been working with Coventry and Warwickshire ICB, who've got quite a powerful kind of BI led report that enables us to run some analytics across all 143 GP practices and kind of provide a comparative analysis of where each arm we can slice and dice that into place and PCNs and different configurations. So we'll be rolling that out over the next few months. But yes, absolutely, really important.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. And finally, Jack.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to pick up on just answer a couple of points around digital exclusion, digital poverty from both Simon and Chris. Digital has had the benefit of allowing us to take care closer to patients who are naturally excluded from home. So it's not just about that sort of patient-initiated action on it. Digital has allowed us to reach in as much as sort of keep people out. I think people often have this sort of view that digital is about just sort of the young and the sort of the tech savvy, but actually it's allowing us to kind of reach in places and proactively where we've not been able to do before, such as remote monitoring things. The other thing I wanted to sort of John Rouse's point around QI, I just wanted to give the board assurance around the QI subcommittee headed, and a big shout out to Ros Jones and John Costello, which I also sort of sit on the subcommittee around it. It's very much a new sort of thematically in general practice and in training and around sort of, I guess, healthcare. It's quality improvement, and continuous quality improvement is now mandated both at a GMC, CQC, and also RCGP training. So I just wanted to give assurance that this is very much a business as usual sort of, but it's in its nascent early stages.
Jack, thanks for adding that background. Very helpful. Really important document, colleagues, that we have before us this afternoon, and just want to seek support to approve the general practice strategy this afternoon, and we look forward to the execution plan that we've discussed during the course of the discussion. So everybody happy to do that. And Jack, Paddy, Chris, and everybody else that's been involved in the production of this document, big thank you from the board. Really important, and we'll move on to this later today when the board will be having a deep dive into primary care services. So thank you. Okay, if we can move into item 6, the Public Sector Equality Duty annual report. Alex, you're going to take us through this.
I am.
Over
Thank
to
you
you.
very much, Chair. And I guess a couple of things just to point out. I'll take obviously this paper as read. It is already on our website. We've had to publish it in draft because of the deadline for us to publish this, and this is now a statutory duty of the ICB. Couple of distinctions to make is that this is not the system-wide programme of work around EDI that falls under the people plan and the system people plan and strategy. This is the formal duty of the ICB to report on its public sector equality duty going forward. So an important distinction for us just to note there. A couple of things just to pull out in the report. There's a number of proposals, and really what I think the report suggests is that we're pulling together a number of elements that we're working on as a system. One is around the equality delivery system that a number of organisations will be familiar with. We're also taking forward as a system the race equality code. We're all undergoing assessments in that space, and we're going to be pulling those actions together as well as the EDS. And with all of that and all of our other statutory duties, things like our gender pay reporting, our workforce disability equality standard, our workforce race equality standards, will form an EDI action plan going forward that you haven't got in the papers but will come through the committees in due course. I just wanted to note in the report, to go back to the previous report on the autism strategy, the work on neurodiversity as employers. So there is something within the report, it's on page 131, but we're very actively trying to work in the space around neurodiversity as well as the other protected characteristics. And you'll see that within the ICB and all employers, I think across the system, have got those networks in place, and we've also got a system-wide network looking at how we influence policy, but how we think about supporting people with neurodiversity at work. So we're very, very active in that space. And lots going on. So it's here really for sign off today more formally. As I say, it is on the website in draft, and there's various links within the report if people want more information to the substance that sits within the report. Thank you, Chair. That's all from me.
Thank you very much, Alex. Showcap.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Alex. And Alex, I completely agree in terms of the bit around, you know, the setting out that this is the duty that we're the legal responsibilities that we have. I suppose what I would like to see certainly for the next iteration of this, or certainly the further work, is the bit around delivery, because I think we all know there's lots of really good work going on, and some of that is set out. And I think it would be good for us to put some targets and measures against those. I know some of those already exist, but for the board and for the wider public to see some of the work that we're doing, the initiatives, the interventions in action, and what we're working towards, particularly where we know there are particular challenges. But overall, really supportive of this. I just think the next iteration should pick up the direction of travel in more detail. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment, Showcap. It is one of the recommendations, I think, in the report around the action plan, and we have to do that as part of our duty and responsibility. So we will bring that back, as you suggest. Very much work in progress. It's the first one we've done as an ICB, and absolutely right and proper that we do that. So we will bring that back. Thank you. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Showkat. And Alex, thanks for the report. Just check if there's any further comments anybody wants to make. Very comprehensive piece of work, and the reflective and reinventive process going forward, Alex, really welcomed. So the board's been asked to note the contents of the Public Sector Equality Duty report that you have before you today, and approve the report to be confirmed as the final version on the ICB website, currently in draft, but obviously will be replaced by this document. So just pause there. Everybody happy to do that? Thank you. Alex, thanks once again for that report. If we could move into system oversight and governance now, item 9, the board assurance framework close down of the 22-23 BAF, and then we're going to move into the draft strategic objectives for 23-24. Sally, I think you're going to do the first half, and then welcome to Claire Cotton, who is, I think, going to take us through the second part of this report. So Sally, over to you.
Yes, thank you. We had our board assurance framework approved by this board back in December 2022. It was the result of quite a lot of hard work with our governance and risk network, helping us pull this together, and Claire's played a leading role in this. So this initial part of the report is to look at the close down of those objectives. I have to apologise as there are some inconsistencies and errors in the report, and it was mainly to timing errors, and we'll make sure we address these moving forward with a proper checklist to make sure we've covered those off. The paper includes a review of the work to date and some suggestions for improvement. Not all ICBs have had BAF reports during that first initial 9 months of our startup, and we have been invited to talk to other areas to let them know how we've managed to pull ours together, working together as a system, which is a really good note to bring Claire in to talk to us about the work on the strategic risks and objectives to form the basis for 23-24.
Thank you, Sally. Is somebody going to share the slides, or are we talking through the paper?
I can do that. Hold on, sorry.
So we can bring the slides up, yeah?
Yeah, we can do.
So I'm conscious of the time, so I'm going to take you through a whistle-stop tour of some elements and focus on some of the more fundamental elements of the pack. So just while that's been presented to you, so just scroll up slightly for me. So we're on the overview and purpose. As Sally alluded to, we've actually come quite a long way, and I know sometimes it doesn't feel like that, but actually we've made quite a lot of progress when compared to other systems in the development of our BAF as a result of the work that we've done together. So Sally has presented to you last year's BAF. What I'm going to be focusing on here is what next year is hopefully going to look like for us. So if we can just go to the next slide, please. So some key progress, as I say, has been made. So we've got a BAF as a system, which I think is first point to call out. That's been scrutinised by internal auditors who gave some positive feedback. We've also had some national recognition in terms of being ahead of the game, as Sally mentioned, and we have been asked to present a case study nationally, actually, in terms of some of the success that we've seen. And I think, as alluded to earlier in the introduction to this meeting, you know, the development of the ICP strategy is really fundamental to the board assurance framework, because what the board assurance framework is about is us being clear about the threat, the risks that we have in achieving that strategy. But you know, this is a journey, and we're not suggesting of any nature that, you know, we are where we need to be. We absolutely will continue to develop the board assurance framework as we move forward. So if we just go to the next slide. So you should recognise this slide. It's been taken out of the ICP strategy, and so I won't dwell too much on that, but just wanted to draw out the 4 lines at the bottom, which are the strategic ambitions, and those are the ambitions against which we have framed the board assurance framework. So you'll see those replicated further on in the slide. So if we just move on again for me, please. So this part of the process is really crucial in terms of development of the BAF, because it provides an opportunity for the executive team to consider what they believe to be the key strategic risks, and it allows us to present that to yourselves as a board to have your buy-in, so that everybody is signed up to and in agreement with what we perceive to be the key strategic risks for the year ahead. So we had a session with the executive team on the 14th of March, where we looked at a range of information available to us, and what I kind of presented as food for thought, if you like, setting out, alongside the strategic ambitions identified within the strategy, what we had in the BAF last year, for example, what we have set out as priorities within the system plan, areas that we'd identified as key challenges in the development of our strategy, areas that we are having oversight through the NHS oversight framework process, and also what do providers have on their board assurance framework. So that provided an opportunity to consider all of that in the round to inform that agreement in terms of what are the risks for the year ahead. So again, if we move on to the next slide. So from that, we distilled the food for thought into these 8 core areas, which will, if agreed today, form the basis of the board assurance framework going forward. Some of these are have been pulled through from the 22-23 BAF, so you'll see those with the little recycling icon next to them, and some of these are new. Because they've been identified as new strategic risks for the coming year. So just to elaborate on that in terms of how we might then present this to the board going forward. So if we just want to skip perhaps the next slide and move on to the more detailed version. So this is an illustration only. But what we've then set to present to you here is those strategic ambitions again. So those that have been taken out of the strategy are set in the 4 coloured boxes across the top. And then those strategic risks from my previous slide have then been set out beneath each of those in terms of which risks threaten which ambitions. Okay, laid on top of that, you can see down the side are the levels of risk and an assurance rating. So those are not real at this stage. Those will be confirmed once we start to work up the risks, should they be agreed today. But I'm very conscious that sometimes the BAF can be off-putting in terms of the level of detail within it, and therefore this aims to set out what the board assurance framework will look like at a high visual level. So if we just move on. We're also looking at further developing the way in which we consider assurance within the board assurance framework. So whilst we've done quite a bit of work around the risk element of it, assurance is a key kind of function of the board assurance framework, as the title suggests. So we are going to move towards a more sophisticated model of assurance, which is the 3 lines of defence. But what we have come up with is a concept that can be applied at a system level. And the aim of this is to reduce duplication of asks in terms of already available assurance. So conscious that some of the language in here might need to be looked at, but the idea being that, as a system, rather than asking for, duplicate reports, for example, there need to be firm arrangements in place whereby assurance from providers, organisations within the system can be used as assurance within this BAF. We're also looking at introducing an assurance assessment model, which means that, in taking into consideration the assurances set out within the board assurance framework, a judgment can be formed as to whether or not that is sufficient assurance or whether further assurance needs to be provided, and that would form part of the action plan. So to the right of my slide, I've presented here what that might look like in terms of a presentation within the BAF. So that will set out all of the sources of assurance that will be used against each strategic risk throughout the course of the year. If we just move on again, please, Sally. So we've been doing some work in the background to support consistency of completion of the board assurance framework, so that everybody is clear in terms of the expectations and the content required, and that will be rolled out as a document, an easy to access document, but also with a training program behind it, so that we can really, support the development of individuals required to provide input into this. And so, should the board agree those 8 strategic risks that have been set out within the pack, we would propose that we proceed working with the individual exec directors to work up those risks, thank you, to work up those risks with a view to them being presented to the committees and the board as part of the Q1 document. So I'll pause there, thank you.
Thanks, Claire. Thank you, Sally. Just pause there for any questions. And Julie, as Chair of Audit, I don't know whether you just want to make a comment before I bring Megan in. Julie.
Yeah, yeah, thanks very much, David. I think it's very clear that the Audit Committee's role is to actually give assurance to the board around the process around risk management. And I can actually really wholeheartedly give assurance around that. I'd also like to acknowledge the hard work that's gone on this year, both within the ICB, but working with system partners and latterly from Claire. So we're now in a very strong position. It's really important today that we do approve these strategic risks so that we get the work undertaken and be able to present that to provider partners within the system. The other thing I just really want to acknowledge is the 3 lines of assurance. I think that first line of assurance that we are proposing to work with providers can be used wider than just within the BAF, the context of the BAF, and it will avoid duplication and allow the ICB to be assured of what providers have in place rather than keep asking for information to provide additional assurance. So I think a great piece of work that can be applied wider than just the BAF.
Thanks very much, Julie. Megan.
Thanks, Chair. I think it moves us on fantastically from where we've got to. I think it's really positive. My question, I suppose, is just, sorry, my clock is going off in the background. Is at the point at which we are, if we agree the 8 board assurance framework set out before us today, if then in the process of developing the risks that sit within those, actually we think one of them needs to change, or we need a 9th one, or we need to take away, presumably that's part of the process which is about to happen next. This is not, we're not setting them in stone now for 12 months.
So if I just come in first, Claire may want to add to it. So this has to be a really dynamic document. Things change, don't they, very quickly in the health service, particularly at the moment. So we will be able to incorporate or include an extra risk or take something away if we've delivered better than that and managed to reduce the score, and it needs to remain dynamic, and that's really important to have execs, NEDs, the board focused on this and to be giving their input so that we can make sure we keep it going. I don't know, Claire, whether you wanted to add anything there. So
Yeah, it's the same as you've said, really, Sally. The most important thing with the BAF is that it feels real. And therefore, if we decide at a point in time, whether it be next quarter, the quarter after, that actually something's missing, it doesn't feel real to us, then we need to take the opportunity to change it, because, you know, once it doesn't start to feel real is when we start to distance ourselves from it. So I would absolutely advocate, you know, have that, you know, continual check and review that it, you know, it feels real to us.
Great point. Thanks, Claire. Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to say a big thank you to Claire and others involved in the process. Not surprisingly, I'm supportive of the detail that's being presented in part, of course, because it's been built with the executives in the room together. But also, I think, given the fact that we've now got our ICP strategy, of course, we've got this document, the development of the strategic risks, you can kind of see it all coming together. And this is essentially for the first time, because, of course, we've been lacking a system strategy, at least in terms of the ICP strategy up until this point. So, yeah, it was just a really big thank you and a relief, really, to an extent, that the framework has now come together and gives us that ability to be able to springboard into 23-24. So, as I say, a big thank you.
Thanks, Peter, and echo that. Can I just check with colleagues that everybody's had the opportunity of asking any questions on the report? Thank you. So the recommendation, I'm just going to expand it slightly. So the recommendation was to discuss the report and approve the recommendations for improving the 23-24 BAF. But I'm also going to add in there that we are formally approving the 8 risks contained in the slide that's on your screen at the moment on page 177 of the pack. And if the board is happy to do that, we will then get the work going behind the scenes as being described during the presentation. So everybody happy to approve that? Thank you very much. Claire, Sally, thank you very much, and to everybody involved. I know Megan and Julie have been involved heavily in this as well. So thank you, everybody. Great piece of work. Okay, if we could move into item 10, enclosure 10, head of the quality and safety report. And Josie, what I think I'll do here, if I can, is when Heather's done her report, if we could pull in item 13, enclosure 13, any escalations from you as chair of the Quality and Safety Committee. Heather, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and sound sensible, because quite often we get to that agenda item and I've covered off quite a bit of what Josie's going to cover, so we can do a bit of a double act here. It's the usual board report, so I'm not going to read it to everybody in great detail, but there are, as usual, a couple of things that have either moved on since the time that the report was written or that have happened completely since the report was written. And quite unusually, I think I'm going to start with the section on the report about out of area. We spend a lot of time talking about our in-area providers. Most of the content of that is information that we're very, very familiar with, and nothing that's particularly news to us in there, although I'm going to add to that in a minute. But from an out of area point of view, you will be aware from the report and from the media that University Hospitals of Derby and Burton UHDB, as we refer to them, were unfortunately fined regarding a patient safety incident. Just need to make absolutely explicit, because I'm not sure it's clear in the report, that that was a Staffordshire patient. And as we would with all such cases, we are working very, very hard to make sure that we maximise the opportunity to learn from the investigation into that particular incident. And on a similar basis, adverse media coverage, really. There has been, as you know, significant media coverage again around the culture reports in University Hospitals Birmingham. And again, our patients do travel across the border into those hospitals. And we are working really, really hard with colleagues, both in the Trust and in the League Commissioner, to make sure, again, that we maximise our opportunities to extract every bit of shared learning we possibly can. From a West Midlands Ambulance Service point of view, again, some of this won't be news, but the CQC did an unrated review of West Midlands Ambulance Service. They did pick up a number of issues which are referred to within the report, but I think it's safe to say that there isn't anything in there that we weren't already aware of and or dealing with. And I say we in the sense of the entire system, particularly with a focus on delays, so response times and delays. So as always, we'll continue to carry on doing the improvement work that we're doing, linking in with Black Country as the lead for West Midlands Ambulance Service. And then something else that we've talked about quite regularly, or 2 more things we've talked about regularly, and then I am going to give some news. The 2 things we've talked about, Ivetsi Bank, what was previously known as Hunter Combe over in Stafford. Continued concerns and escalations coming in around Ivetsi Bank, and you know we've talked about it, being very open about our concerns, and they continue to be escalated. Everybody that needs to be involved in this is involved in this, including the safeguarding boards, who've requested, the Safeguarding Children's Board recently requested some specific assurance in relation to activities being undertaken within Ivetsi Bank, given the outcome of the most recent CQC review. Again, my team working really, really closely with the provider collaborative from Birmingham, who are responsible for that particular facility. But of course, this is in our area and involves a small number of our patients as well as others. So we stay very, very close to that. For anybody who's not seen it in the press, there has now been the publication on the 30th of March of a single plan for maternity and neonatal services with a view to driving improvements over the coming 3 years. We'll take that forward through the local maternity and neonatal service board, and we'll obviously update the board as we need to periodically throughout that period. On to a couple of good and positive news stories, because that felt slightly the other way. Just to say that since the board report was written, we've been notified of a couple of really positive pieces of news. One, I hope I'm not stealing anybody else's thunder, is just to acknowledge that Midlands Partnership Foundation Trust have now been awarded university status by Keele University. Congratulations to them, and grateful thanks to their team. Jack earlier referred to the continuous quality improvement work we do, and we work very, very closely with John Costello from MPFT, who leads our subgroup of the Quality and Safety Committee. So just to take the opportunity, whilst positively reporting on MPFT, to talk about John's work. And then just this last week, UH&M have been awarded NHS Pastoral Care Quality Awards for the safe recruitment, induction and support of international recruits. Really, really positive news, really, really important given the number of workforce challenges we're often talking about at these meetings. So it would have been wrong of me not to highlight both of those really positive points. Other than that short canter through, I'm happy to take the report as read and take any questions in response.
Thanks, Heather. Just pause there. I think if Josie, if you could take any escalations as well, and then we'll wrap any questions up when you've raised those from the report we've got.
Yeah. Thank you, David. I'm going to take the report as read. There isn't anything specifically to escalate to the board. I think Heather's picked out the key items. The one thing I did want to say, though, is that we did have two positive items on the agenda, which were around never say this, UHMN, around their fellowship scheme and their Care Excellent Framework refresh. And it was good to see a bit of balance. We always focus in on the issues and challenges, but they were really good to see, and we were grateful to receive those presentations, and hopefully they will be things that obviously can be spread, used across the system in terms of learning, etc. So thank you, David.
Thanks, Josie. Thanks, Heather. Just pause there. Any points that board members want to raise with either Heather and Josie on those reports? Full report and transparent report, and thank you for that, Heather. Okay, that then moves us into item 11, the Finance and Performance 23-24 plan. And Paul, you're going to begin. I think Phil will do a double act with you. And Megan, can I just do the same as I did with Josie as well, and ask you if there's anything that you'd wish to escalate from your report when that presentation's taken place under enclosure 14, that we do that at the same time so we can bring all of that together. Over to you, Paul.
Okay, thanks, David. And I think there are kind of two parts of this agenda item, both kind of double acts with myself and Phil. So the first part is looking back, how have we done, finance and performance, and then the second part is the 23-24 operating plan, again finance and performance. So the first of those I don't think will take so long. We've got 15 minutes allocated to see, so hopefully we can spend most of the time on the second part. And certainly I'll be very, very brief on the first part of the finance look back. We have now all system partners have closed down positions. We are now into the audit period. Really pleased to say, as you referred to at the start, that we have all recorded a break-even position. So that's a break-even position for the system. So subject to audit, we have done it, and therefore we're halfway there to the 2-year challenge that we have in order to get the 300 million on a balance sheet written off. 2 years of subsequent break-evens. We've done the first of those. So we'll obviously go back to this through audit committee next week. Week after, we'll be looking at the draft accounts, and then we'll come back to the board once we've completed the audit. Phil, do you want to talk about performance looking back?
Yeah, if it's okay, Paul, and I might just straddle the forward look bit as well, because particularly around elective care, it's all part of the same story, if you like. So from an urgent care perspective, I'm really pleased to report that despite the continued challenges we've had in terms of flu, COVID and industrial action and several bank holidays, we've continued to maintain good flow throughout the system, and we've had a sustained reduction in the ambulance handover delays despite of all of the things that I've mentioned. We do remain in national oversight for ambulance handover delays with weekly meetings in place. But as of today, we have a weekly report on this. We've delivered a 90% reduction in terms of handover delays since we entered the National Oversight Framework last July. So that was a really, really significant impact, especially in the context of the operational challenges we've faced. So as we move forwards, we have a really strong urgent and emergency care improvement plan for the year ahead. We've got targets that we need to meet through the operational planning process around improving handover, improving ambulance response times, A&E performance, delivering appropriate capacity and flow for the entire year, including winter. But we've got a really good energy and set of detailed plans that sit behind that. In addition, we've done I think I referenced it last month, a learning event at the end of March, which a detailed report went to F&P committee around looking back at everything we did in terms of planning there, and that has been used to inform our planning for the year ahead. So that's UEC. Moving into planned care, and this is the bit that very much straddles the 2 years. Last month I reported to board a deterioration in the forecasted year-end position in terms of eradicating the 104 and 78 week waits. I think as set out in the CEO report within these papers, at UHM we ended 22-23 with 4,604 week waits and 558 78 week waits. So that was clearly a significant challenge. As a result, we've moved into Tier 1 oversight for planned care, with the specific focus on the eradication of these long waiting patient delays, and we've got the task of building a clear path to ensuring we have no 65-week waits by March next year, in line with the national planning guidance. So essentially, as many other systems enter the year having achieved a elimination of 78-week waits and working to get into 65, we've got the challenge of dealing with the 104-week waits that remain over from the end of last year, tackling the 78-week waits and delivering the 65-week waits by next March. So the first step of this is to agree a route to zero with regional and national support to address the 78-week waits by the end of Q1 of this year. As I say, the Tier 1 oversight approach supports and facilitates this. The key action areas for that are, firstly, an external review is underway in terms of waiting list data capture, the training for how we apply rules and processes around waiting list management, reporting and governance. That's within UHM, but also looking at processes for mutual aid and monitoring of the independent sector work. We've got a revised trajectory and capacity and demand model, which has been developed to help us track progress and identify risk. Had a really successful event only yesterday with the independent sector providers who we work with, and over the coming weeks we're looking to lock down a plan that will maximise their capacity across the whole system as we move through the year. And we're also seeking external support from the national team in terms of maximising our productivity opportunities. So, for example, we've got a national team coming in 3 or 4 weeks' time to look around orthopaedics and look at how we can maximise the throughput through our theatres. We've also got similar work going on with endoscopy, and then we've also got support from NHS England to continue to facilitate mutual aid from outside of our system. So all of that's coming together in terms of that route to zero for the end of Q1 in terms of addressing the 78-week waits. I would, however, flag to the board the risk associated with further periods of industrial action. We saw significant impact last week around our elective programme, and any further periods will present further challenge to delivery of that. But then, as I say, the longer stretch here in terms of looking ahead to next March is that eradication of 65-week waits. And as we sit at the moment, we're not forecasting a zero position there, but we are working to get to the point where we can forecast a zero position and build confidence in that. Thanks, Paul.
Great, thanks, Phil. And that links in well to the forward look, which was the second part of what I wanted to talk about. So the operating plan for 23-24 starting to take really good shape. So thanks to colleagues for their help within the ICB, but across the wider system. Last time here we looked at the triangle, as we call it, which set out the system priorities that were agreed by partners, and we've now started to frame the operating plan to ensure we deliver those priorities, really trying to get down to some quite sort of detailed level of who's doing what, when they're doing it, how we'll know whether they've done it, so we can actually get into a really strong position in terms of holding each other to account. And within the operating plan, we've showed how tasks connect between providers, local authorities, and into the portfolios. And one of our colleagues, Steve Grange from MPFT, helped design what we call a hopper, but it's the concept is that all tasks go into the hopper and they come out in a certain place, so we're clear who has responsibility for those tasks. And the operating plan that I referred to is setting all that out, so that will come back here next time. So it's getting close to completion. Because we were focused in on at the end of March on the national requirements to submit the plan, we've decided to focus on the operating plan, our internal operating plan, this month, and we are on course to where we said we would be. The draft is nearly complete. It's going to System Performance Group next week. I'll be looking to talk to colleagues John and John in the local authorities as well next week. We'll be incorporating that feedback, and that's going to come to the System Finance and Performance Committee for sign off week after next, and then back to the this group the meeting after. So yeah, we're keen that it will be a really clear description of what we need to do in the year, and it will give us the ability to then really hold each other to account across the system in terms of the delivery of the plan. Phil's referred to some of the challenges for some of the operating targets. If I can just touch a bit upon the finance within the plan. As everyone knows, finance is a statutory responsibility to achieve financial targets. We do not have authority to miss that, and we want to live within our means. And for me, the more that we can get into that sustainable financial position, the more it gives us the opportunity to really develop our clinical services. The two go together. So we are really keen to retain financial balance if we possibly can. We haven't been able to get there yet. So the plan that we submitted at the end of March showed a deficit of 39 million. That was quite a significant reduction from 79. So very grateful to my CFO colleagues. It's difficult, but we worked through, and we agreed that we really needed to push further on efficiency. We recognised that we were outside of our statutory responsibilities, and therefore we needed to do more. And in the pack, you've seen what we call the stretch, 40 million of stretch that we put into the plans. That's been worked through, and each of us are now taking that through into our internal our organisations to make sure that people are clear on what that means. And we're very focused on delivering that, but that still leaves us with that residual gap of 39. There is an escalation meeting, Chair David, you're coming to, of course, along with myself and Peter and Tracy Bullock. Thank you, Tracy, has agreed to come and join us. So we're going to be asked to go to meet the national team to talk through where we are. I think it'll be really helpful to do that, because clearly we face significant financial risk. As I say, we're completely on board with wanting to get to financial balance. It's not that we don't want to, it's just that it's extremely difficult to do that, and hopefully we'll get some guidance and steer at that meeting in terms of some of the ways we might be able to do that. Final thing, just to say for the board, in terms of how we've distributed that system deficit of 39 million, we agreed as CFOs that we would plan in providers for break even. So all the providers supported that, which entailed moving money between providers, and we've left the deficit sitting with the ICB. So I think that gives providers extremely challenging but hopefully doable financial targets. Tracy Neil Bookie may comment, but we believe that they are, say, challenging but doable. It brings the problem down into sort of one area that we can then focus in on as a system, and look to see if there are other things that we can do. We don't think there is further efficiency to be had, which is why we've done it this way, because I don't really believe it'd be helpful to go through a never-ending cycles of asking people for more and more efficiency. We've kind of exhausted that one. We're now into looking at allocations and how they're used and deployed, which is why, as I say, we played it this way and put the deficit into the ICB's books. David, that's where we are right now. We'll obviously update the board next time on how that discussion goes, and we'll also bring back the operating plan for approval next time.
Paul, Phil, thanks very much for that very comprehensive overview. Just before we move into any questions that the board may have, Megan, can I ask you, are there any further escalations from the Finance and Performance Committee that you'd want to make at this point?
No, thanks, David. No, an updated, the wrong template was sent out with the original paper, so an updated template has come out this morning, just so decided on the right one. There's nothing I want to pick out other than to say that we will, at our last committee meeting, we did have a good conversation on elective performance, which Phil has articulated. And we did agree that we'll continue to have a greater focus on elective performance and what we can do as a committee to support the system around recovering elective performance going forward. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Megan. So just pause there for any comments that board members may have on the report or reports that have just been presented. Everybody happy to move to the recommendations on those? And we've been asked to discuss and note the contents of the Finance and Performance Report, the contents and update on the 2023-24 operational plan, and the further actions required to finalise the operational plan. Okay, so everybody happy to receive those? Thank you very much. Once again, Paul, thank you. Thank you, Phil. So we'll move into item 12 if we can, the Freedom to Speak Up report. And Sally, I think you're going to take us through this.
Yes, I am. I became the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian for the ICB on the 1st of July last year. There's quite a detailed pack of training you have to do for that role. So this report really is a summary of what we've put in place already and the background to it with recommendations in it. So just as a bit of background, the Sir Robert Francis report, The Freedom to Speak Up, was released in 2015. And as part of that, the National Guardian's Office was set up and the role of Freedom to Speak Up was put in place. We've got over 900 guardians in the NHS and independent organisations now. So that role has really grown and developed. And I can assure everybody there are a whole series of networks across national level and regional level for this very important role. So we've included in the pack our new policy. This has been released by the National Guardian's Office. We have added to it. We're not allowed to take anything away from it. And all trusts have got to adopt it by January 2024, and we wanted to get ahead of the curve with this. A key part of the the new policy is that we will focus on speaking up and our channels for speaking up, so that there are ways that people can raise issues or concerns much earlier on in the process before it develops into something that needs a full Freedom to Speak Up investigation. Now, the ICB has done a lot of work in terms of setting up these channels. We took part in the Freedom to Speak Up month in October, and we launched a page on our intranet and on our website with the range of different routes, and I've got them outlined in the paper there. I won't go through them line by line. We've also set up our own network across the system in Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent as a safe place to share concerns and issues that Freedom to Speak Up guardians may be having in their organisations or with individual cases, but that is a very safe place, and the information is not shared. It is confidential information, but it is somewhere that we can discuss and go through how best to resolve some of the issues we might be facing. We've had very regular briefings to our staff on freedom to speak up since the beginning of July. Previously, Heather Johnston in the CCGs was the freedom to speak up guardian. This is something she set up in place before and we have carried on with. One of the things we're proposing, well, not proposing, we've put it in place, is that we'll expand our mandatory training for staff so that the 3 modules that there are, both the Speak Up module and the Listen Up module, will be completed by NEDs, chairs and execs. And then the follow-up module is NEDs, chairs, execs and band 8Ds, 9s and very senior managers, because we think it's very important that all of our staff understand what speaking up is all about. The modules are quite user friendly. I've had, since we started this from April the 1st, I've had lots of really good feedback from individuals who've done them across a range of different grades within the organisation about how helpful it was and how much they'd enjoyed taking part in them. A work that's in progress at the moment is we've had the delegated commissioning of primary care, which we've spoken about at this board many times before, which came into place from the 1st of April. We need to make sure that we've got the right speak up processes available for each of those 4 services that have come under the purview now of the ICB. And then just really to summarise in terms of the paper, we're asking for ratification and approval of the Freedom to Speak Up policy. It's been widely shared across Quality and Safety Committee, Staff Engagement Group, all our various networks that are listed in the paper. We'd also like to have a NED assigned to lead for Freedom to Speak Up. That's something we haven't got in place and we feel it's really important to do that. And I think there are further discussions about whether the Guardian's role should sit with an exec or whether it would be an improvement if it sat outside the executive. And we agreed with NEDs this morning that we would do further work on that and look into that. So I'm very happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sally, for taking us through that. Just on the non-executive director recommendation there, Sally, there is complete agreement that we will look to allocate a non-executive director to that role. And we are beginning a cycle of individual meetings at the moment to look at portfolios and responsibilities across the team. I'll be having that conversation fairly shortly, and we'll report back in due course. So just to give you that assurance. So any points anybody wants to make from the board on the policy and report? Okay, so just to recap again, the board is ratifying the Freedom to Speak Up policy and is supporting the ongoing work for speaking up across the system and the organisation. As I've referred to, we will assign one of the non-executive directors to be the lead NED for the Freedom to Speak Up function. And we're agreeing that a further Freedom to Speak Up guardian who is not an executive role will be nominated in due course. So with your approval, that work will now be enacted. Okay, thank you very much. Once again, Sally, thank you for that. Items 13 and 14 have been dealt with as part of the previous business. Any other business, I've had no items notified in advance. Just pause in case any board member has any urgent item that they need to bring to the board's attention this afternoon. And at that point, we'll just pause and I will invite any of our guests who've joined us this afternoon to ask any question. And if you could do that by raising your hand, we'll bring you in. So anybody who wants to raise any point with the board on the agenda. Ian, welcome. Please state your question.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear, Ian. Thank you.
I'm noted for a loud voice, as you know, David. Right, interesting meeting, very interesting strategy documents, and I would like to thank the individuals who presented the autism strategy for emphasising the problems that can exist with transition as they can in other areas of health and social care. Right, clarification first, please, on the mental health summary and the performance and finance report. And it's children and young people eating disorders, routine cases, national standard yet again not attained. What are we talking about here? Is there a national standard that doesn't apply to the ICB or it's national? Or does the ICS, ICB area have not attaining the routine cases, eating disorders? Could I have clarification on that, please? And if it is the responsibility of our area, how are we going to get back on track of attaining the standard?
Okay, thanks for the question, Ian. I'm just looking, Chris Bird's going to answer that question, Ian, for you.
Yeah, so just in relation to, so there's two measures for timeliness around CYP with eating disorders, routine cases, as you say, Ian, and then the urgent cases. The routine cases, so there is a national target, it's 95% of routine cases need to be seen within 4 weeks. We're currently projecting that will be about 76-77% of that, so we will be falling slightly short. They tend to be very low patient numbers here, so you often find that 1 or 2 patients makes a significant difference to the percentages as they're reporting. That sounds like an excuse, it's not meant to be. We do then review each breach, and we know within the breaches we've got here that the delay over 4 weeks is because there's been a conversation between CAMS and the eating disorder service to make sure that the patient is on the right pathway. So the reported level of performance is below the national target, but as I say, each of those reviews are reviewed at the point that the breach occurs.
So you're expecting to attain the standard within a certain time period? There's the trajectory?
Yeah, so if you look at our planning submission for the 23-24 operational plan that Paul's just taken us through, I think of all the there are a range of mental health measures where we've submitted green plans against all of those, with the exception of IAPT, and there's a particular set of reasons why that's the case, linked to some national issues. So yeah, going forward, we expect to be achieving them.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks, Chris. Ian, yeah.
Yeah, it's the quality and safety report. Heather's touched on a lot of this, and exceptionally good report, Heather. It's the safeguarding and looked after children situation. I know the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence issued quality standard regarding looked after children in Quality Standard 31 in 2013, National NICE Guidance 205 in 2021. I realised there's been a problem in the past, because I've been involved with a problem in the past of looked after children not receiving timely reviews of their health assessments. I understand also, Heather, through the chair, that you're looking into this. Will a report, or whatever the outcome of your investigations, be reported publicly?
Thanks, Ian. Heather?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian. Thanks for your comments and for your question. Really important question. In terms of both the initial and the review health assessments, historically, what we've reported has been near compliance with the required rate. However, just before Christmas, and I think it was in last month's board report, we highlighted a significant drop in the compliance data, which actually, when we looked at it, started to unpick, it doesn't tally with the data that our 2 local authorities hold. So we're very cautiously unpicking that data. And I say cautiously because obviously don't want to set hairs running, but it's absolutely essential that we do fully understand the correct position. I'm exploring this at the moment with colleagues across the other integrated care boards. So all chief nurses have got a similar problem, or the majority of chief nurses have got a similar problem. So we're doing a collective piece across the region to look at how we can make sure there's a standardisation of that data and a standard understanding. So the short answer to your question, Ian, is yes, when we've done that piece of work and we're absolutely confident that we know exactly what the position is, whether that be a more positive one or whether it isn't, we will report that back as part of the normal quality and safety process. It will go through the safeguarding forums, through the Quality and Safety Committee, and then come up to board once we know the full outcome. So yes.
Brilliant, thank you. A final one,
Thank you,
if possible, please, Chairman. Right,
Yeah.
again, safeguarding. It's the section 42 timescales, backlogs. I've looked at Derbyshire's, I can't find anybody else's, practice guidance, and they talk about 24 hours within receiving an inquiry or the next day, a working day, there will be either actions or clarification. Have we got timescales for section 42 for us locally, and what kind of time lapses are happening? And with safeguarding, right, if looked after children are resident, never mind where they've come from, but are resident in care in Staffordshire, who leads on safeguarding for those individuals resident in care in Staffordshire? Who leads on children, looked after children, because I know a lot of Stoke-on-Trent children are out of area. Who is responsible for safeguarding for Staffordshire residents placed outside the Staffordshire Stoke-on-Trent area, and how do you coordinate the safeguarding situation?
Thank you, Ian. Heather?
Thank you, quite a lot there, Ian.
Yeah, so can you cover that in the meeting, Heather, or do you need time to get that information?
I can cover it briefly, but then if Ian wants to have a conversation, he's got my email address. We do occasionally exchange emails, and I'm happy to go into more detail.
That's
so
great.
Just to be absolutely clear, the section 42 enquiries is the safeguarding adults work that we're referring to. That's not explicit there, and actually it would probably be helpful if it was, because what we do is group all our safeguarding together. In terms of the standards, it's less of an issue about meeting our own standard. It's more of an issue about the fact that at the moment, historical practice has led to a place where quite a lot of the section 42 work that comes our way probably shouldn't in the nicest possible way. So again, we're just redefining the responsibilities and trying to understand who does what to make sure that the limited capacity that we have got within the safeguarding team in the ICB is appropriately and correctly used to undertake the health aspects of any such inquiry. So that's that first piece of work. And again, if you want to talk to me in more detail about it, Ian, or to one of the safeguarding team, I'm quite happy to make that happen, because it is quite a complicated process.
Right.
Then in terms of the looked after children and who makes sure that the well-being of the looked after children is overseen, and I know there's colleagues from local authorities on who may want to contribute, but in its simplest term, it depends on who's placed them. So if health have placed, health become the corporate parent and take a responsibility, and if social care have, then social care will. It's much more complicated than that, but actually that activity is undertaken irrespective of who's done it. Looked after children, we do pick up from a health point of view, we pick up through the Health Safeguarding Forum, which is just being revisited to make it a more formal subcommittee of the actual Quality and Safety Committee, and with a link in through me to the Safeguarding Children's boards in both Staffordshire and Stoke-on-Trent, which called slightly different things in both areas, but you'll understand the Safeguarding board term, so that we've got clear and described accountability through, and make sure that the communication is there, and that we're highlighting any concerns in respect of any aspect of looked after children's agenda.
Okay, I think I need to be contacting you with emails, Heather, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely fine, Ian. I'm happy to pick those up.
Sorry.
Yeah, Ian, thanks very much for your involvement this afternoon, and thanks for your questions. Heather has committed to make that happen for you, and the extra clarification will be provided. And Heather, presumably we can make a note of that as well for the minutes that you know, Mr. Sands asked that question, just so we have that for completeness. Ian, thank you once again.
Thank you.
Okay. So we just move into item 17 if we can, meeting effectiveness. We started out with our behavioural compact. Just want to pause there and check any comments on meeting effectiveness or any points anybody wants to raise. Okay, thank you. Just want to also just check that everybody's had ample opportunity to raise any issues that they've wanted to raise against any of the reports or other issues that have been brought before the board this afternoon, and everybody's going away quite happy that they've had that opportunity. Thank you. So we'll close the meeting if we can. The date and time of our next meeting is the 18th of May. It'll be 1 o'clock, and that will be face-to-face in Stafford at the hub. Look forward to seeing you there. Can I just ask board members to remain on the call for a moment, because we just need to recalibrate the start time probably for our next meeting, which will be the deep dive into primary care. But thank you everybody for your contributions and attendance this afternoon. Jill, if you can just let me know when recording stopped, and then we just need to have a discussion about